Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here's the host of The Pleasure Zone, sensual movement artist, relationship and sex alchemist, Milica Jelenic.
Welcome, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight, it might also be my sleep pleasure seekers. For those of you reading the title of the show tonight, or have heard it, or are thinking, hey, you might have clicked on this on one of the multiple platforms that is available on, we're talking about sexsomnia and other parasomnias, but mostly sexsomnia. Like, what is it? Does it happen? Is it real? Is it fake? What is it? What is it? What is it? So why do I talk about these things? My name is Milica Jelenic, and I love to talk about sex. That's my true confession right there. I love to talk about sex. I love to talk about pleasure, bodies, and anything to do with all of that realm, right? So when I do talk about sex, I like to talk about it from historical, sociological, anthropological, psychological, biological, physiological, and also emotional, spiritual, and mental aspects of sex. So many different ways to look at sex and the different things that are involved with pleasure, especially pleasure, because under talking about sex and intimacy, a lot of people have the idea that sex equals a certain thing, and sex looks like body parts coming together, but sex is actually really broad. It's a broad spectrum of things. Sex is actually just a term that we also use to identify genitals. So what we're really talking about here is pleasure and all the different ways we can have pleasure, which who doesn't want or desire pleasure? Even people who don't desire sex actually also desire pleasure in their own way. So the sensation that has your body feel like it's enjoying life is something that people desire, and enjoyment can come in so many different ways. So if you've ever listened to the show, you'll know that. You'll also know through the 400 or more episodes, I think I'm almost at 500 now, episodes that you can listen to. There are so many different ways to experience pleasure, and all of them we talk about on this show require a few things: consent, communication, curiosity, and there's a bunch of others, but those are three main ones. And so this particular topic tonight, sexsomnia, is there's a little bit of a gray area here that can be kind of questionable. And so we'll be talking about that gray area because there are some people who have had experiences in their sleep and they were not conscious for it, and they've considered it to be a violation. So there are some things that we will talk about in that area, and we will talk about sexsomnia as maybe a pleasurable act as well. And what is this sexsomnia? Sexsomnia, and I'll give you the definition right now. Sexsomnia is actually considered a sleep disorder. It falls under a category of parasomnias. So para just meaning like many, and just like paraphilia is like a different, many variety. Anyway, I won't get into Greek right now. So sexsomnia is an abnormal disruption of sleep that results in people engaging in like sexual activities of all kinds when they're sleeping. So funny but true story. As I put this topic out, actually because one of the people that I work with had brought this topic to the forefront as an experience of theirs. And hilariously enough, it was just mere like 2 days later, I was like, hey, I'm going to do a show about that. And so in creating this show, the energy was kind of there. It was just like present, but I hadn't said anything around the house. I hadn't said to my husband, hey, I'm doing a show about, sexsomnia this week. Hey, how fun is that? Let's talk about that. Sometimes I'll mention the topics, and I hadn't mentioned it to him. He's been working long hours, so I haven't got to be able to have those funny conversations. And so one night I realized that he was like rather ready for fun, and I didn't say anything. And I normally will be like, hey, you want to get it on? But he didn't refuse me, so he didn't like push me off or go to sleep, leave me alone. And and then in the morning he actually wondered if I was awake or asleep when I did that. And I was like, I was fully awake when I did that. And so it was kind of funny. I said, that actually does exist. Like, in the middle of this hilarious conversation, he's like, it exists. He's like, people do like sleep sex, like sleepwalking. And I'm like, yeah, yes, this actually does exist. I said, so it was a valid question if that you asked me, was I awake or was I asleep? Because this does happen. And not only does it happen, it probably and possibly has happened to somebody you know. It's probably more common than you think. The actual act of intercourse is not necessarily as common, but in the umbrella of sexsomnia, you've probably experienced something in that realm. So for some people, their first thought, as I was kind of tapping in, like, what do people think of this? Like when we talk about this topic, one of the first thoughts that kind of come up is, well, if you have nocturnal emissions, so what does that mean? For those of you who don't know that term, nocturnal emissions is when you're sleeping, and if you have a penis and you ejaculate, that you ejaculate in the middle of the night. It's like when you're a teenager, you're going through puberty and you wet yourself, right? Wet dreams. So wet dreams are, the proper name for them is nocturnal emissions. So as much as bodies with penises have nocturnal emissions, bodies with vulvas also can experience orgasmic energy and orgasms in the night and wake up with wet dreams. They're just not as necessarily evident as they would be if you have a body with a penis, where the ejaculation comes right out. Although some bodies with vulvas, I don't know that you'd squirt in the middle of your sleep, but you might. I haven't read anybody testifying to that, though I do know many people who have had orgasms in the night. So how amazing is that you can and you could experience that. So you can see that this is kind of broad. So as we talk about it, you might find that it's both a fascinating topic and it's also a very controversial one, because when we talk about sexsomnia, and if you just think about the scenario, you could be in bed with your partner and you're sleeping, and out of nowhere, they start having sex with you. Now, if you don't have like an underlying unspoken understanding or knowing that this happens, like if you know that your partner will engage with you with sex in the middle of the night, if you're aware of that from the get-go, and then when they do that, you're like, oh, okay, this is just them sleeping, and you can check in and see if they're sleeping, then, or maybe you have it too, and you're both asleep the whole time. That could happen too. So if you know that they have this particular sleep disorder and they start to engage in having sex with you, but it's already pre-understood that that might happen, it might be a little less alarming and less feeling like a violation knowing that. Or if you're thoroughly enjoying it and you're consenting to it, that's cool too. If it happens to be that you're in a situation that is more traumatic than that, and you feel like you were sleeping and then all of a sudden somebody starts making out with you, having sex with you and you hadn't consented to it and you didn't know this was happening and it's shocking to you, you might react in a way that's indicates that you feel traumatized. So it was really interesting talking about this topic because the story that I was told was actually really delightful and funny and playful. And the couple that experienced this were really, really cool about it. But as I was like looking at this topic, I was like, wait a second, I have actually experienced this way back in my early 20s. I dated a guy and he was like, I'd slept in bed with him many, many, many times. And so, like, sleeping, sex, whatever, we'd been together for a couple of years. And so it was really strange that we had gone away for like a little weekend holiday and we were staying in a new location. I don't know, maybe we had been drinking wine. It's hard to say what, or maybe there was stress in the environment because sometimes those experiences will lead to the action of sexsomnia, like subconscious reaction. Whatever it was, or I could have been having like super sexual dreams that night, and the person I was with might have thought that I was ready or asking or something, but I wasn't. I was completely asleep. And the person I was with started having sex with me, and I woke up in the middle of it and I was like taken aback. I was like, what the hell? And my first reaction was I believe I did this, and maybe it was just I thought that I did, but I'm pretty sure that I actually hit them as a reaction, just like a, and then I realized who it was, and I was like so confused. I didn't, for one, I was like confused about where was I and like what was happening, how did this happen? But I didn't feel like he had, like, looking back on it, I know that he was not violating me. He just didn't know that I wasn't awake, because I suppose my body was reacting like I was, or he was asleep, or I was asleep. One of us was asleep, maybe both of us, but I remember waking up and either hitting him or wanting to hit him. And so if you're listening, I'm really sorry about that. I know you'll know who you are because it's the only person that's ever happened with. So yeah, that was different. So it'd be strange if you were listening. You don't need to comment on any of the YouTubes or anything. Just send me a message. Hey, saw that show, listen to that episode. Yes, I remember that crazy incident. Or hey, I blocked that and completely because it was traumatizing to me too until you mentioned it. There you go. So it's a bit of a tricky, sticky situation. I think if you know that it's something that you've experienced before, that your body does this, then definitely let your partners know. And whether it's that you want them to wake you up so that you're not having sex with them without their permission, or if you want them to whatever it is, give them the prompt of, let them know that, hey, if I start having sex with you in the middle of the night, just wake me up. That wasn't I didn't intend to do that. It's a sleep disorder, right? If you know you have this and you find that you do it frequently, like on a daily basis, and your partner is not okay with it, then you might want to get separate bedrooms. The chances are they're not going to also be a sleepwalker and sleep sexing at the same time, although it could happen. So if that was the case and you don't want somebody walking in or being around you and then having sex with you in the middle of the night without your consent, you might want to put yourself in another space or another room so that you're not being had sex with out of nowhere with no conversation and no consent. But if you have been in a long-term relationship and it's happened before and it's kind of just this thing and you didn't really know it and it wasn't a big deal, that's cool. That's and you talked about it after and whatever, it was all fine. If it was bothersome, then I think you need to discuss that. If the person does it and they don't, and you brought that up and if it bothers you, and the person who has the sexsomnia, it doesn't bother them, and it keeps on interfering with your life and your body, then there are some bigger conversations to be had, and they might need to go to a sleep clinic to be observed. So we're going to talk about more things around sexsomnia and other parasomnias that are maybe sort of in that realm that are sexy-like, because there are a lot of parasomnias. Sleepwalking is one of them, and there are other names for those things. It's like somnolescence, or that's maybe an old term. So, for sleepwalking. Anyway, so we will head to our first commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. And as I said in the first segment, you could be my sleep pleasure seekers too, with this episode being all about sexsomnia. So it's a sleep disorder where you engage in different sexual behaviors while you're asleep. So this can be a problem, right? We know that this, as we discussed in the last segment, this could be a problem, especially if you have a partner who is not okay with you having sex with them in the middle of the night. You know, even if you've discussed it and they know that this could happen and they're not okay with that, then it's not okay. So, you know, doesn't mean that you have to get divorced. Everything else might be a-okay, but you might want to have 2 beds to sleep in, doors that can lock, just in case they also sleepwalk and find their way to your room. So also, because it's a sleep disorder, it's something that you can start to seek out some assistance for through sleep experts, right? So I don't know how you feel about it, but it could be something that if you do go into a sleep clinic, you might find that you are doing things that are sexual while you're being observed. So that could be tricky. It's actually something that I thought, if I ever had a sleep condition where I had to go into sleep clinic, I probably wouldn't sleep knowing that somebody's watching me. But I would also feel like really embarrassed if I was having super deep. I talk about sex all the time, but I talk about it while I'm awake and conscious of it. So I wouldn't want that to be something that was my unconscious acting on something, and then maybe like feelings of ridicule or something coming up. So I would find it really uncomfortable. I know me, and I know I've had many super sexual dreams that have been physically, my body has reacted and had like climaxed. So I know that that is possible. And yeah, that is something that is probably happens to me on a regular basis. So the question, regular as in at least a couple times a month, I will have super sexy sex dreams that are intense. So some of the things that people talk about regarding sexsomnia is that it could be related to different traumas. So whether your body is, going through something subconsciously, trying to work some old trauma out or abuses out, it's very possible. Some of the other things that have been discussed is like what causes sexsomnia is, and these are by different like sleep studies. So some other things that might cause sexsomnia are other like external factors, whether it's stresses from work or life or relationship, or things that you're doing to your body, like having alcohol might suppress certain things, and then it comes out in your sleep. So probably other drug things as well. So what, the bigger question I think is like, can you and how do you, is it like actually possible to overcome and get through sexsomnia? So the best way that researchers have found to manage or deal with sexsomnia is to have regular sleep-wake schedules. A lot of times the sleep-wake schedule can have an impact on them. So mostly say for example, you do shift work and you're going from one shift to another, your body might be under a lot of stress. And as a result, you might have more experiences that are sexsomnia experiences than you would if you had a regular working schedule and regular sleep schedule. So that's one way that they suggest to overcome it, is create a regular sleep schedule. But sometimes it can go deeper. So you might need to talk to a therapist, a counselor, a coach, anybody who can give you some tools to be able to navigate what's going on. And also how to have those uncomfortable conversations with your partner. Or, you just start dating somebody and, maybe they're staying over once in a while, and it might be a vulnerable conversation to bring it up. How do you bring these things up? And just like anything else, I think sometimes bringing these things up, it's good to be tactful to see, how somebody reacts, and just you can ask questions like, hey, have you ever had, well, let's play a game of the weirdest things that's ever happened. Have you ever had sex in the middle of the night? You can have fun with conversations. Absolutely. Sex in the middle of the night while sleeping, right? So you might want to add that part in. So you can have it as a playful conversation. You could also just rip it off like a Band-Aid, right? And just go, you know what? I have this thing where sometimes in the middle of the night, I will just start having sex randomly, and I'm asleep and I don't know that I'm doing it. And it's just something that happens. It's as much and as real as people sleepwalking. So, sometimes they say not to wake somebody up in the middle of sleep, but if they're having sex with you and it involves your body, then, that's a little bit different. If they're on top and they're bigger than you and you can't get away, well, that can be tricky. So wake them up, because it's your body. Don't take it for granted that you're supposed to stay there because it might harm them or something. It's your body too. So that's nowhere written in the literature. That to me is just an obvious choice. I would look after my body in that circumstance, as I was telling that story about when I was in my early 20s and like woke up in the middle of somebody having sex with me and like freaked out, and I'm pretty sure I hit the guy because I didn't want to, like, we were staying with that person's family and I didn't want to yell and wake them up. So I might have, because I have also had experiences where I just woke up screaming like my dreams were so real that that I screamed like I was in an attack or something. So yeah, so those things can happen. So I want to talk to you about other examples of sexsomnia, because I think a lot of times we hear just that one word sex and we assume that it's going to be penetration again, right? And it's not. So this is a wide spectrum. So it can also include things like sleep masturbation. And I can't tell you how many dudes that I've been with, okay, I've been with some dudes, but anyway, will be pretty much fully asleep, masturbating, and wake up and not realize that they had, or if it's shaking the bed. I was thinking of somebody from like uh, my late 20s who really could rattle the bed a lot with masturbating at night, and I'm pretty sure he was half asleep half the time doing that, and the bed would be moving and shaking, and I would wake him up and be like, dude, like stop it. Like I would wake up because the bed was moving so much. Like those are my sound effects, but it was intense, and it would like move a lot. I mean, I won't get into details, but it was very thorough self-pleasuring. So as much as that's all fun to watch and things, it's also like in the middle of the night, it's really hard to sleep through. So, it's probably more common than we think. It might not happen to people every day, but I bet somebody's experienced this. Or at least most people have experienced something like this at least once in their life. And it can even be things to the effect of like, could be masturbating, could be even like sexual moaning. It could be like having orgasmic responses vocally, like doing the like that. I won't get into that too hardcore. I don't want to scare my producer tonight. So the moaning, the sounds, and also maybe feeling yourself off. You could even be feeling your partner up. Like it's hard to say. You could be doing a lot of different things. And most of the time, the person is completely unaware of it, as if they are off in another world, completely unaware that they're doing that. They might wake up in the middle of it and realize what's happening, but generally, as it's going on, they do not know what's happening. So one of the other things to like I've also seen this. So I was a nanny for years, and I've seen this in kids, although I don't know if they actually report it in kids. The reports that in the literature reports on sexsomnia, I'll give you an example. So in 2019 there was a study done, and in the 115 cases of sexsomnia, that the ages of the people were generally men, although I'm sure women experience it as well, and either they don't remember their dreams or they don't have, we'll say, evidence left behind, where, wet dreams for men, there'll be evidence left behind. And it usually goes from between ages 26 to 63 years of age, but for sure it can be older, it can be younger. It absolutely, I think in younger, say young teenagers, absolutely, I think that happens. And even I think even myself, actually, now that I think about it, now that I'm processing in front of you guys on like live TV, I remember being a kid and waking up to like masturbating at the age of like 5 years old, and or being woken up because I was making noises and then waking other people up, and then they'd come in and find me like sleep masturbating. And I think not that I had fantasies connected to it, it was more like from what I remember, it was probably more for just like stress release in my body, and relaxation. So that was around the time that my parents were separated and felt very pulled between people. And so I was probably processing things in a way, moving the energies of sexual repression for my entire family through my body, through my sleep time, because that's the kind of kid I was. So, and I don't do that as much anymore. But when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the other things we might need to know about sexsomnia. Some things that might be able to help you so that if you do have it, other than like the regular sleep patterns, what else can be done? We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about where to go from here and anything else that I come up with. So if you do happen to have sexsomnia and you would like to talk about it, you can contact me through my website, milicajelenic.com. You can book a time for 15 minutes. We can talk about that. Find solutions. If you just feel like you need to just be able to say it out loud once to somebody so that you can say it to whoever else in the future. Sometimes getting it out once can really help. And true confessions sometimes help to be able to have the conversation more than once. So you can connect with me. We can talk about that. And if you'd like to come over to Inspired Choices Network, if you're listening live tonight, then you can come on over, ask some questions in the chat room, and I'm happy to work with you through that. Alrighty, or tell a story. If you've got a story and you want that story shared publicly, no names attached, I'm cool with that. Happy to share your story. So you're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Interested in masturbating for money, copulating for consciousness, and pleasuring on purpose? 21 Days of Sexual Magicism with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic is an exploration of tools, processes, and actions that you can use to create more for your life, your body, your money inflows, and so much more. Graduated learning for all levels of interest. Learn at your own pace via video classes or join the yearly live class. Take a peek at www.milicajelenic.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we're talking about sexsomnia, which is a sleep disorder that it can be disruptive to people's lives. It can be disruptive to their relationships. And so, one of the things I want to talk about, as much as it can be okay, and you might have only had the experience once or twice in your life and it hasn't really taken over your life, there are people who experience it on like a regular daily or practically daily basis. And a lot of times what happens is that when a person has been caught in the middle of the sexsomnia experience, like if they're, somebody walks in and sees them masturbating in their sleep, and that happens again and again, if it gets brought up, then there's sometimes like embarrassment and anxiety that goes on. And so then there could be like a fear of things like sleeping at friends' houses, a fear of, even having people over, a fear of intimacy on many levels. And if they happen to have, if they happen to be not having really deep sleep because of the sexsomnia, then they might even be on high anxiety during the day, or even to the level of depression, because they're not getting enough sleep, but then they're worried that they might sleep during the day. And what if they slept, say, in public? Say you're on like a subway or something, and then you just started to fall asleep, and out of nowhere you start masturbating. Two things can happen: A, humiliation, but the other thing could be that you could get arrested for public indecency. And I'd say pretty much all countries in the world, you'd get arrested for public indecency, even if you were asleep doing that. I don't know that people would be able to prove that you were, or you'd be able to prove that you were sleeping, and they might not take it seriously unless you had prior habit of doing that. I don't know how they would deal with you. So it can be the anxiety that comes from that can really make it bad. If you've only had this happen a couple of times in your life and it hasn't ruined your life, then you might have a different experience with it. If you've just noticed once in a while that you've woken up, you're like masturbated, but nobody's said anything, so you don't feel humiliated or anything like that, you just get on with your day and whatever. But if it's interfering with your life and you feel like you're not getting enough sleep, or you're feeling really tired, and you're, just nothing is really working for you, because when you don't get enough sleep, your body doesn't function well. So you end up having all kinds of issues. So if you're waking up and you're feeling sleepy during the day, then you might find that, you're like afraid to sleep. So the fear of sleeping can often cause you to want to get really tired, but then you can't sleep, but then you want to sleep, but then you can't sleep. So it's a bit of a funny cycle. So what do we do about it is the big question. Well, a lot of times there's a multi-level approach. And the first one that was discussed, that we talked about on here, was creating a regular sleep schedules. And if you do live with people and they've seen this with you and they've noticed it in you, then maybe locking your door. So, if you happen to be loud and moaning at night, maybe if you happen to be lucky enough to live in a home where you could have your bedroom in the basement, your parents are upstairs, and then nobody can hear you, even if you're moaning loudly or something, that could be helpful. That's one alternative. Get yourself into a place where you can actually relax and feel like nobody's watching, nobody's listening. And then your body can start to get back into a sleep cycle. However, that's not always going to work. So there is breath work that can help, especially if you feel anxiety or trauma. There's different kinds of breath work you can do to learn how to control your nervous system. So a lot of that falls into the category of pranayama breathing. Some people call it holotropic breath work. Some people call it somatic breath work. It's all kind of in the same vein. And it can be really helpful in helping your body to be able to resolve deep traumas that might actually be triggering this unconscious behavior, and which is considered a disorder. So sometimes there are other things going on too, like, it would be good to get a whole bunch of things checked. Maybe you're like low in certain hormones, or higher or lower, or your body's reacting in a funny way. But I think getting a multi-dimensional approach to healing this would be great. So talked about the breath work, regular sleep schedules. Another thing that I would do if I found that I was doing this a lot is I would talk to somebody, a therapist, to try and uncover the unconsciousness that was going on, or work through it with a coach. And then what else would I do? Well, I've done a lot of things for healing in my life anyway, so I'd probably go through something like hypnotherapy to find out too what's the underlying thing. If you don't know it consciously, then hypnotherapy is great for getting to the subconscious. Make sure your hypnotherapist is certified and trained, because there are a lot of people out there putting out shingles these days who do not have certifications. So get yourself somebody who's qualified, and preferably who works with people who have sleep disorders, parasomnias of any kind, to help find that. So finding specialists in this field can be really helpful. I would also do things like take certain vitamins to help my body feel calm, like B12s to calm down the nervous system. I would take some other things too. I would actually probably take some Bach flower remedies. If you're not familiar with those, they're really cool remedies that work on emotional levels. You can work traumas out. There's one that's called Rescue Remedy that's great for all kinds of traumas. That one would probably be a go-to. And they've also created a sleep one as well. So taking something that would be helpful for just getting your body to sleep. I'm starting to yawn just thinking about sleep. So yeah, I think it's very dependent on how often you're experiencing your sexsomnia and how much it's affecting you, and if you have a partner, your partner, or if you happen to be living at home and you're, say, a young teenager and you're waking your family up all the time because you're having all kinds of orgasms in the middle of the night while you're asleep. This might be interfering. So why I say that is there's actually a documented case of a 16-year-old boy who did have, he was a sleepwalker as a child, and then when he was older, he ended up becoming having sexsomnia as well. And sometimes people who have had sleepwalking as a child will end up having things like sexsomnia later on in life. And there are, although a lot of the people who have reported it are men, there are more and more women starting to come out to actually talk about that. So you're not alone if you are a woman and you're wondering about, the cases that I presented are mostly men, and like the boy and the guy that I was with, and then the guy that was the inspiration for the show. These are all dudes, right? So this one, this one is such an interesting thing though. Like sleepwalking, there are some pretty terrible consequences that can happen. There was a fellow who was pretty well known in the design community, and he had a show with his partner. So I'm not going to name names right now, but he had actually died several years ago by sleepwalking off of his building. So he lived in Toronto. And I'm like 2 degrees separation from that family, so I'm not going to name them. But that does happen. It's dangerous. So in the same sense that you could have danger related to sexsomnia, a lot of the parasomnias are things that do need to be evaluated and find solutions for, because it can lead to problems. I wouldn't want you getting arrested for having sex with somebody in the middle of your sleep because they didn't have a conversation or consent to it, and then you get arrested for rape. That would be really crappy, right? So it's something you're going to want to get under control if it's something you do have. I know this seems a little bit more serious than normal conversations that I have about this, but it can be serious, like getting in trouble for having sex with somebody without their permission can be a big problem. So yes, what else? And now I'm thinking again. What did we, oh yeah, so um, some of the people who need to look at getting the most help for sexsomnia, I would say, are the ones who are experiencing it on a very regular basis. So if you've only had it once or twice in your life, I wouldn't worry about it so much. But if it's something that you know you do and you experience, if you're waking up masturbating 3 or 4 times a night, if you've been told that somebody's seen you doing that 3 or 4 times a night, that's something that needs to get addressed for your health and for also for your safety and the safety of partners in the future, so that everybody's on the same page. So we're going to come back. We have one more break to go to. When we come back, we will address the finalization of this episode and address some of the outstanding questions that I have posed for you guys. So you're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is the Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight, we've been talking all about sexsomnia and other parasomnias, which are sleep disorders. Parasomnias are just like a range of sleep disorders. Sexsomnia is a sleep disorder related to sex, where you will either find yourself in the middle of sex and wake up realizing that you're having sex, or you could be going through an entire sexual experiences completely asleep in different phases of your sleep cycle. So really deep sleep where you're not even noticing that you're doing it. Sexsomniacs are usually unconscious when they're doing these things, and the behaviors themselves are also unconscious. And sometimes it takes other people noticing it or seeing it, which can lead to like a lot of embarrassment, and that can lead to anxiety, and that can lead to a lot of other things. There are even reports of people being suicidal because of sexsomnia, to the point because of the embarrassment and the way that it's affected their life with partners. So there are things that can absolutely help and heal this, and generally finding the root cause. A lot of the medical papers written on this deal with using therapies like hypnotherapy and also breath work, which is great that they include breath work. And I bet there are actually homeopathic remedies out there for that as well. There are homeopathic remedies for literally everything. I've never had to look one up for this, but I bet for all those homeopaths out there, I would love to hear if you guys have ever had anybody come through with sexsomnia and what you've done to help resolve that. And I do know with homeopathy, you usually take a really extensive history, health history, life history, even things like, do you like being in the sun more than the dark, all that kind of stuff. It's really an intensive interview usually, and that can be helpful in determining what the remedy is. So talking to a homeopath can also be an option if you find that other things like hypnotherapy or breath work haven't done anything for you, then that can be helpful. I recommend doing a lot of these things before, say, getting yourself on antidepressant medication, because when you're on antidepressants, you're going to be on for a really long time. So finding some solutions to help you through that first, or, can be a bit of a longer haul. Sometimes the medication is necessary just to keep you alive so that you can do the longer haul later on. But there's a really fun story to share. We'll call it fun, a sexsomnia story that is also part of a case study that was with a 40-year-old male soldier, and he was in the clinic several times for his sleep clinic. And during sleep clinic, he had sleep masturbation occurring several times over the few years that he was being studied. And he was actually concerned about whether he could be deployed for going off to, a combat zone, because he felt, so he also had he also did sleepwalking as well. And one of the things he was worried about would be that would he walk off in the middle of a camp and, he could walk into a military zone. But also he was concerned that if he was in a situation with other soldiers, that he was concerned whether he was going to end up just either masturbating in front of them, or that he would end up having sex with them with no consent. So he was actually quite concerned about that. And he also had some other sleep issues too, like sleep apnea. So he's having a hard time breathing. So one of the things that helped him was having better posture and increasing his air. So for those of you looking for better posture, I was actually going to do an entire show on posture and sex, because one of the things that I do in my private practice is I do something called the mitzvah technique, which is somatic movement to help improve posture and have better postural habits on a daily basis. So your body, all your movement becomes like exercise in a way, stretching movement and realignment of your body just through new postural habits. So that can be helpful as well if you find that you have that, and that you're having some breathing issues in your sleep. A lot of times correcting the placement of your neck, your head over your body, so that everything's in alignment, can really help. So you can breathe better, so that you can not have the anxieties when you're sleeping, or that you can start to alleviate the sleep apnea. So I think one of the things to just keep in mind really when it comes to sexsomnia is that it can happen to anybody, anytime. You could be as young as a child, like I was, waking up to, I know I was masturbating a lot when I was in the middle of sleep, and I think it was just a way of stress release. At the time, I never had people like thinking that I had a disorder, so I wasn't medicated or anything like that. I was teased by everybody who saw me doing that, which probably didn't help. But screw that. They were probably jealous that they weren't, masturbating in the middle of the night, in the middle of their sleep, probably. But, and you know what? Yay to my inner child for being so cool, and big hugs to her. So if you have experienced any of this in your life, and you have experienced humiliation or sadness or anxiety around it, and you'd like to work that out, I'd be happy to talk to you. Remember, and if it's not me, there's somebody else out there too that you might connect with. You can always talk to a sleep expert. They get it. They've heard these stories before. You definitely won't be the first person coming to them who has had sexsomnia. Even though it's the first time I've talked about it on this show in nearly 10 years, literally just because it just came to my thoughts to talk about it. It's an important topic because I think it can create issues in a relationship, and we need to be able to resolve that. And it could be creating issues in your health, so you need to resolve that too. But if it's not creating any issues, and it's only happening once in a blue moon, and your partner doesn't mind and you don't mind, then I wouldn't worry about it, as long as you're both.
Thank you for listening to The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. The Pleasure Zone returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.